Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. And I can't think of anybody better that exemplify that spirit of small business than my next guest, Kelly Clements. She is the founder and head coach of the Entreprenewer. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. So you got to explain this. And I know we already had to explain how to spell mosaics with a Z. So obviously we're going to have to make sure we let our listeners know how they could spell the Entrepreneur. But we'll get there. Kelly, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yep. I work with entrepreneurs and primarily with their spouses. I've been coaching entrepreneurs for about 15 years, and I really realize that the spouse is the most valuable asset in any business. And so I've shifted my focus from focusing on the business owner to focusing on his or her spouse.
It is such an important issue, and to folks that might not be in business and they watch the dynamics of how successful small business operates, it probably seems strange to see the partnership. The truth is, we talked about partners with our last guest. The truth is, the real partner in business might not be on the legal paperwork, but it is the spouse. And I absolutely agree with that. So, Kelly, there must be a story behind that. Tell us how and why.
Sure. So it started actually on my first day when I was coaching entrepreneurs with a coaching company called Strategic Coach. So I'm in the workshop room with entrepreneurs from all over the world. And I noticed on day one that my clients fell into two camps: those that would count their spouse as their greatest asset and those that didn't. And the ones that counted their spouse as the greatest asset were consistently hitting their targets. They were blowing through their goals, and their growth was really done in tandem with their partner. So that's when I got to work on that. And then it's a case of be careful what you wish for. I ended up in partnership with a highly successful entrepreneur, and I learned very quickly that the spouse of an entrepreneur is not all about brunch and breakfast in bed.
So absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about, let's start with the success story, and then maybe we'll move on to a disaster story, success story. How, in the ideal situation, should that partnership, collaboration, whatever term you want to use, but how should an ideal relationship between a entrepreneur, a business owner, and their spouse, how can they support each other? What's the right balance? What advice do you share with your clients?
Yeah, so that boils down to my whole premise, which is it takes two extraordinary people to create one extraordinary relationship. And a lot of times where I see couples go wrong is when the spouse really loses track of his or her identity, because it's hard enough for a business owner to keep their identity separate from the business. And then if the spouse loses her identity, now we have two people who are kind of lost and looking to each other to fill that proverbial bucket. So the balance is really that both people are showing up fulfilled, happy, complete to that relationship, because we don't want to depend on an entrepreneur to be filling that bucket at home because so much attention goes to the business.
Sure. And what about family businesses? Have you gotten into that angle of multi-generations in business?
Yep. I actually I'm in the fourth generation now of family business, so I understand that very well. And it's always a struggle. And the first question that comes to mind is, well, what do we talk about at the dinner table? It's always about business. And that's why I really encourage couples that they get out and play, have hobbies outside of the business and outside of the kids so that couples continue growing together. So play is one of the things that I really work with couples on, so that they have really high quality free days and that they're taking advantage of their time freedom, and that time away from work is spent well rejuvenating and actually enjoying a high quality of life.
So it's funny, because that is counter to what often people talk about there's really no lines in business and family. You're saying that there needs to be lines. There actually needs to be some pretty strong lines and very, very bold lines that are created between family time and business time.
Absolutely. And not only just to protect the family, but also to protect the business. We need to shut it down. It's in those periods of rest where we get that rejuvenation and our creativity comes back online. So having those fine lines of personal and professional really is important, not only in protecting the relationship, but also in protecting the business.
So let's talk about the Entrepreneur. So how did that name come about, and what does it mean to you?
So the Entrepreneur is spelled with the word renew at the end. And a lot of entrepreneurs experience burnout at some point in their career. And it came up because I love to travel. I'm a huge advocate for enjoying quality of life, and I saw so many entrepreneurs just burning out because we have this badge of honor with the grind. Like, we work 24/7, and we're always plugged in, and we're always available, and it becomes our calling card to the detriment of our health and our relationships. And so the entrepreneur is just really offering a fresh perspective of how we actually grow, which is in that time of rest and rejuvenation.
So I have a strange question for you. It's about identity. Mm-hmm. So when you're out and about, a wise friend of mine once said that he uses the street test, the Devon Avenue test. When he sees somebody walking down Devon Avenue, there's usually a first impression that comes to mind. He thinks, oh, that person works for XYZ organization. When people see you, what do you want people to think? Do you want them to think of you as an individual, of you as a business owner? What identity do you want to create? And because I believe that ties into that message and that coaching that you're working with entrepreneurial couples on.
Yeah, so entrepreneurs really are the heartbeat of the business. And so if people are looking to them as the business owner, the business is actually fleeting, right? And so if the business goes away, that's where most entrepreneurs really start to have this identity crisis or the meltdown, and they attach their self-worth to their net worth. So I don't ever encourage that they get their identity from the business, because the business can come and go. However, when they are showing up as the best version of themselves in the business and for their families and for themselves, everything around them thrives. They become the gravity or the source that feeds everything around them. So I really want to get their identity on what's factory installed in them, and everything else is the result of that.
Well, speaking of identity, you clearly have this very, very firmly established, and you've clearly helped a lot of people. So, Kelly, you recently wrote a book called The Power of Play, Praise, and Purpose. Tell us a little bit about what sort of tips and advice you share.
Sure. So the power of play, like I said, is having some really high-quality, rejuvenating free days. If we look at our love relationship, the thing that got us to the altar in the first place was our dating relationship, and that's complete with play. That's all it is recreational activities. And so I get couples back into a sense of play so that their love can continue to grow. And on the note of praise, entrepreneurs are actually very psychologically similar to psychopaths. And so if we're not careful in an entrepreneurial marriage, we have a lot of opportunities to criticize our spouses. And so I talk about the compliment to criticism ratio and making sure that in an entrepreneurial marriage, we depend so much on that affirmation and support from our spouse. And so really making sure that there's a lot of affirmation and support that goes on in the marriage, and that we're not always tearing each other down, because in that times of high stress and crisis, it can be easy to turn on one another. And so I'm always having my clients keep their fingers on the pulse of that compliment to criticism ratio. And
for an individual that might be in business, but really they do a successful job of leaving work, whether they're an entrepreneur or not, they might be a professional. I was about to say just, and that's completely inappropriate. But if they leave their work at the office and they come home, is that a bad thing?
Absolutely not. That's a great thing. That's the dream, right? And from a spouse's perspective, to have somebody come home and to be present, that's what all of my couples are going towards. So I don't see any flaw with that at all.
Very interesting. Well, great advice. And so, Kelly, you have been doing this for a while. Any idea of how many couples and how many businesses you've been involved in helping to grow?
Couldn't even begin to tell you, and hopefully the reach would be even further than I can imagine. I do a lot of speaking too, and so one of my favorite testimonials was from a woman who heard me speak in Hawaii, and she said, I heard Kelly speak, and I booked my flight to come home the next day, and I wanted to be with my family more than being in Hawaii, because she changed my perspective on how important it was. And so hopefully my reach goes farther than I'll ever know or be able to count on my spreadsheets.
It's absolutely fantastic, but it would be very, very interesting to know how many people you've impacted. Just before we share your website so people can find out more about the book and find out more about all your coaching, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked our last guest. What advice would you share? Just, again, being in business, I know you shared a lot of advice for couples, but being in business, what advice would you share with a young entrepreneur?
With a young entrepreneur is to really understand that play is a prerequisite to success. It's not the reward for it. Grinding it out is not the way. So just making sure that you're protecting your personal time to grow other activities. From a business perspective, you're going to see that it's going to increase your productivity. And that's where the disruptor energy comes in. When you expose yourself to industries outside of what you're used to being in, you can bring that creativity back to your own business. So really prioritizing play.
Well, Kelly Clements, the founder and head coach of The Entreprenewer. And how can people find your book, and how can they learn more about all your coaching?
Yep. The book is on Amazon. My website is kellyclements.com, or you can find me on Facebook is where I'm most active.
Okay, well, check it out. Some great advice, and whether you fall into this category or you certainly know somebody that does, this book is a must-read, and Kelly is a must-meet. So be sure to check it out, and we'll link to it on our website as well, shalomklein.com. After the headlines and after a few quick breaks and commercials, we'll be back talking about the important issues of the day in the world of business. You don't want to miss it. Check out our sponsors, tandemhr.com. Give them a call, 630-928-0510. Chicago, we'll be right back.
She ran out.